Hey, Faith family. I pray that you're doing well today on this Saturday. It is a little warmer today than we've had this week, so that's good. I know many of you have faced the cold, and we're still praying for those in North Mississippi and then all throughout the states that got the ice storms this past week, just praying for them, especially out in Texas. We've been praying every day for them. Wanted to come to you as our Reflect Day as we look back to what we've read as a faith family, and I pray that you are reading with us. Genesis 34 through 47 is what we read this week, and thank you for being faithful to that. Kind of in a different spot today. I'm over here in the sanctuary. This is, just to be honest with you, this is my favorite place, especially in the quiet as I get ready for tomorrow and pray for you and pray about our services. It's just good to be here. It's good to to kind of just breathe in and pause. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for posting and thank you for praying and let me know that you're on. Just wanted to take a moment before we just jump into the reflect, just to let you know that I am praying for you. I think a lot of times we say, "Oh, I'll pray for you," or a lot of times somebody will, make the comment of, "Oh, I've got to remember to pray for them," and usually that in itself is just their prayer because they really have no intention to pray or to spend time praying for someone. So just the mention of, "Hey, I'll pray for you," that seems to be their prayer. And I want to tell you that's not how we should do it. That's not what we do. I want you to know when I say I'm praying for you, I'm actually praying by name for you. One of the practices that I have, just to let you know, is I was visiting with a senior adult this week in our church, and she was reminding me of how she does her prayers, and it was funny because this is the way I do mine individually for you is I just grab our directory, our church directory, and it helps me every day. I go through and to see the faces of those that are in there, the names in the back that have addresses, and then we've got new members that have joined since last year when we did the directory, and I pray for them, and then I've got little postcards, or index cards. I've got situations or names of people written down, and that's my practice of praying. You say, "Well, Matt, why are you telling me that?" Number one, to reassure you and let you know that your pastor is praying for you every day. I'm lifting you up. It is a privilege and a responsibility. But second, to just encourage you. To hopefully let you know that I'm lifting you up. And if you watch this video today, I'm going to go back and look over everybody who's commented or everybody who's let me know you watched, and I'm going to pray for you by name because if you need prayer today, I want you to know that I'm praying for you. And so one of the best places to do that is here in the sanctuary. I love being in here. Especially as I look to us gathering tomorrow. I want to remind you that we'll gather at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and we will have a time where we sing together, we fellowship together, but a time where we look at the Word of God. We're going to be in 1 John chapter 2, 12 through 17 tomorrow, and I'm definitely excited about that. I've been preparing for that, so I hope you'll join me in that. But today, I want to discuss just a little bit with you as we reflect on what we've read. I want to encourage you, read the Bible with us. And this is for everybody in our church. I know we're autonomous, and I know everybody individually can do what they want as far as your own reading plan. But what I've noticed is that most of the people who join in with us finish that plan, and they end up reading. Those who do their own plan, or those who start their own plan, or those who just, let's be honest, out of rebellion don't want to do what the church is doing, usually about 2 or 3 months into it, they're done and they get discouraged or depressed. Listen, we've got this plan together. That's why we're doing this together, to encourage one another, because this is the moment, the end of February, where most people drop off. Most people stop reading, and we're about to get into some heavy books that are crazy. But the way that we've put together this plan and reading only 5 days a week and reflecting over that, giving you time to catch up, and doing this 2-year through the Bible plan makes it really, really easy. For instance, yesterday we only had 3 chapters that we read. And so there really is no excuse. If you can't read, you read and comprehend, you can listen to it. Just there are apps on the phones. There are CDs that you can get, and to encourage you even more, I put out videos every single day that we read that helps to explain a little bit of what we're reading. So you may be saying, I don't understand it. Well, if you'll go and watch the videos and listen, I've considered all different ways to do this. I've did YouTube videos for January and February, and want to continue doing that. I've thought about going back live every day just to encourage people to do that. We are trying to do everything we can to make it easier for you to read the Bible with us. I want you to know the thing I care about the most as your pastor is not trying to build up a huge church and a huge following of people, or a huge thing of likes and comments, or trying to get a crowd here. I care about you individually growing in your walk with Jesus Christ. I want you to know that. And so that's my prayer, is that you would, as you watch, that you would read. And now, all of this is a long introduction to, let's reflect on what we've actually read. Genesis 34 through 47. What do we see in this? I've written down just a few things. Remember, we ask 4 questions when we reflect on what we've read. Again, and this is the tough part. This is the study part. This is why Saturdays we don't have a reading. Sundays we don't have a reading. I want you to reflect and actually ask, what have I learned from what I've read? And so we ask 4 questions. Number 1, what is the context of what we've read? Second, what are the cultural aspects? Third, what conclusions can we make from our reading? And fourth, how does this point us to Jesus Christ? So again, 14 chapters we've read this week. Not a lot. You can catch up on that today. What's the context? We've got in chapter 34 we see the daughter of Jacob, Dinah. This began this tragedy that took place in 34. We also see the sons of Jacob, and all the way through 47, we see the story continued of Jacob's sons, especially Joseph and his brothers. And so, what do we see? Well, contextually, remember that all of this connects back to Genesis chapter 12, in which God called a man named Abram to leave his father's place, to go and to travel to a land that God was going to show him. And then Genesis 15, we see the covenant with God that he makes. And so there is this connection all the way, though we're towards the end of the book of Genesis now, this connection all the way back to the beginning of Genesis. Why? Because there is a context. We don't take stories out of context. We don't take verses out of context. We see how God's main story in this. But even more so, it doesn't just connect us to Genesis 12. It connects us back to Genesis 3, in which God promised that a Messiah would come. The seed of the woman would come, crush with his heel, crush the head of the snake. Why does that matter? Because even the stories of Jacob and Joseph point us to that Savior, Jesus Christ. So see the context in your reading. Why do Genesis 34 through 47, why do those chapters matter? Because they ultimately point us to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as we get into next week, the book of Exodus, why does Exodus matter? Because you are going to see, and I hope it just blows you away, you are going to see how the gospel shines so much through the book of Exodus, and I'm looking forward to that. Then we ask, what are some cultural aspects from this? There are differences in things that we understand today and how we live, and then how they live. Just a few of them. Number one, the giving of wives. We see in chapter 34, Dinah, Shechem was asking for them to give her to him, and his father Hamor asked to give her to him. We see that for family alliances, and then we see it was common for people to move around. And we see a nomadic lifestyle that's not as true today, as we settle And we see that change and shift in the Bible as it continues. But during this time of the writing in Genesis, it was very common for the nomadic lifestyle. We see changing of names. We see Jacob's name changed to Israel, and we see God reminding him of that, and that your name mattered today. There are many that they love picking out names for babies and things like that, but more so in that day, names really held such a value and almost a predestination, if I can use that term without offending, of what your life might be, or a declaration of what was going on in the situation of that day when the baby was born. But we see God changing the name. Also, we see heritage in families. You'll see you've read in these passages where a list of like Esau's sons, and we see the genealogies. We've seen it all through Genesis. Why does that matter? Well, because it first gives us a historical accuracy, a list that shows us we can go back. This isn't a fable. This isn't a myth. There's historical accuracy. We see the calling of God for the Jews to be separate, which allows us to see that Jesus Christ would come from the Jewish, the nation of the Jews, and then from a certain tribe. And so all of that, even in our passages today, help to secure and stabilize our faith. What we read this week are foundations of our faith today as believers. So that's the context, that's the cultural aspects. Just a few. Maybe you have some. I'd love for you to post those. What conclusions can we make? I've got 4 main conclusions that 5 main conclusions that I came up with as I was just looking back over today and thinking about. Number 1 is that when we walk in disobedience, disobedience against God, our life will not be at peace. What you see in the stories we've read this week are comparisons between those who walked in obedience to God and those who walked in disobedience. And when we walk in disobedience to God, the book of Proverbs declares this to us. Many biblical examples, they show that you will not experience peace with God. I don't mean just happy times. I mean peace with God. If you're in direct rebellion against Him, you will not have peace with God. You will not have peace, the peace of God on your life. But also, when we walk in obedience to God, listen, bad things still can happen to us. And this is something we've got to be aware of. There are many that will try to sell you a bad bill of goods. They'll try to promote this health, wealth, and prosperity, that all you have to do is just become a Christian or go to church and everything works out in your life the way that you wish it would be. You can live your best life now, those types of things. And those are lies from the pits of hell. We know that when you're obedient to God, actually pressure from Satan comes even harsher. We have a target on our back. Joseph is one of the examples we've read about his life, and Joseph follows God, a man of integrity, and yet he was put through the ringer. We saw this in the book of Job. We see this now in Joseph. You're going to see it with other biblical characters, that a life lived for God is usually a life of suffering and pain, but it is worth it in the end. And this is where we see our third conclusion. God is sovereign. Remember what we read just yesterday. Joseph tells the brothers 4 times, he says, God did this. God did this. That God is working all things out. And you may not like that. I may not like that sometimes, that I actually, have to just throw my hands up and say, look, I surrender. But I would rather trust in God, who holds the universe in His hands, than myself, who can't even cause myself to breathe. And so God is sovereign. He's over all things, meaning right now the suffering you're going through is not meaningless. It's not useless. It matters. God is sovereign over it. But if God is sovereign, Satan is still scheming. This hit me as I was reading this week. I'd not really thought of it before, is that Satan doesn't know the future. I mean, other than what he's read, okay? Satan doesn't know the future. And so at the time that Joseph was born, we read in Genesis this story this week, how Joseph was the favored son by Jacob. At that time, he was the youngest of the brothers. He was favored. He had this multicolored coat, which mainly it's more about the length of the coat than the actual color or even texture, anything that you would put there as an adjective. It was the length. It was this coat that signified that he was not to work like his brothers. He was to actually to be over them and to supervise. And so, so Joseph is the superior one. He's the one in this role over them. And as he's given this role, the youngest brother, Joseph begins to have these dreams and things like that. And I started to read it not from Jacob's perspective, not from Joseph's perspective, not from God's perspective. But I then asked, and don't call me a heretic, but I then thought, wait, from Satan's perspective, from the accuser of the brethren, from the one who is trying to stop the plan of God. If I were to pick out, if I knew that the Messiah, or the one who was going to set everything right, if I knew that my enemy, okay, Satan, if he's speaking, if I knew that the Messiah was going to come and he's supposed to crush the head of the serpent, if he was going to come from from Abraham to Isaac, and from Isaac to Jacob, and if I were going to choose out of those brothers, the one person that God was going to bring Jesus, ultimately the Messiah, from that tribe, it would ultimately be Joseph, right? Like that's who I would jump to. In fact, most people who don't really read the Bible, but they have kind of an understanding of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they immediately go to Joseph as the next patriarch, and they say, yeah, Jesus came from that line, not really understanding that Jesus actually didn't come from the line of Joseph. I began to think about that this week. If I were Satan, Joseph would be my natural pick. He would be the one that I would want to kill. And so could it be that Satan, again, this is Matt's opinion here. This is, I want to make that clear. But could it be that Satan, in orchestrating, we know Satan orchestrates hatred and jealousy and all that. He can put that in our hearts and whisper that to us. But ultimately, it is our flesh. The brothers were held responsible. Could it be that Satan orchestrated the evil against Joseph because he believed that Joseph was going to be the one through which God brought Jesus from his tribe? That Joseph, the most loved one, the most protected, and that Satan, even towards the end, or even in Joseph's life, Satan allows him to be accused of rape because of, or Satan accuses him of rape. God allows that to put him in the prison. If he's in prison, he can't perpetuate the line. And then when Joseph does come to rule as second in command, that Satan still tries to work in causing conflict between he and his brothers. And I got to thinking about that Satan really doesn't know. Satan only knows that much. He knows what has been declared to him. He knows what we know, the Bible says, and he probably knows that better than we do. But Satan really doesn't understand fully. He is even blind in his pride and anger and hatred. It just hit me that maybe Satan thought Joseph would be the one that Jesus came through. And yet, who does God use? Well, in our reading this week, we read Genesis 38 says that God provided the line of the Messiah not to be perpetuated through Joseph, but actually through Judah. And we found out that, and we're going to continue through this and find out that the line took place through a woman named Tamar. And Tamar and Judah have she's appears as, she's not, but she appears as this temple prostitute that Judah has. And then she deceives Judah. 3 months later, she's pregnant, and Judah's going to kill her. And she says, hey, you're the one that I slept with. And as I thought about that, I just thought, God can use even mess ups, or God can use sin that does not justify the sin, but it definitely reminds us that in our sin and wickedness, God's mercy and grace shines through. So I don't know what you're dealing with today, but one of the conclusions I make is that God is sovereign, Satan is scheming, and doesn't know the full plan, doesn't know how things are going to work out. He's a beast, but he's a beast on a leash. He is created. God is creator. Satan is not equal to God. And so we thank God for that. And yet man is offered salvation. That's the final conclusion we make. That yes, bad things, when we're disobedient to God, we're not at peace with him. When we're obedient to God, we still will face trials. He is sovereign, Satan is scheming, but salvation is offered to us. And this leads us to our final question. Where do we see Christ? And we see Christ all over this week's passage. in the life of Joseph, we see Christ as the greater Joseph, the greater deliverer, the greater one who would provide salvation, not just for his family, but for us, for the whole world, that Christ would die and offer his life as the propitiation, as the lamb slain for the sins of the world. And so our reading this week, yes, for some, you may need to play catch up today, but I would ask that you read and be amazed, be in awe that God would orchestrate everything so that he might bring about the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ. And in that's why I'm right here this morning, or today, this afternoon. That's why I'm right here. That's why I was in my study this morning. That's why I'm praying for you today, because God, in all of his goodness and mercy and grace, he poured his love out on us. He really does love you today. And I don't know if you just need to hear that, need to be reminded of that. I did, and I do every day. So as we gather tomorrow, I'm going to ask, would you gather with us? If you don't have a faith family you're a part of, come and be part of ours. Come and put your stakes in the ground here at Sharon, or wherever you're a part of. Put your stakes in the ground. Be there. Support your pastor. Support your deacons. Support your church members. But if you are part of my flock, I expect to see you tomorrow. And if you have to be home, I understand that. I do. If you're still in quarantine or things like that, we've got several who are sick, and we're praying for them. And just for their sake, I'm not going to share their names. You can know it by the prayer list, but over Facebook, I'm not going to share it. But if you need help, if you need encouragement, if you need prayer, be with us tomorrow so we can pray with you and strengthen you. The greatest place you can be tomorrow is with us. And I know there are many right now that all week you've gone to your job. All week you've gone to or when you could, not for the ice, but all week you've gone out to different places and all month. And yet some of us still don't feel safe at church. I'll just be honest with you, the safest place for us to be is here in the sanctuary. And I would encourage you to do that. Look, I love you. I'm praying for you. I wanted to come live to you today and just reflect with you on this. Go back and read if you haven't read yet. If you have, take your journal, write out culture, context, conclusions, Christ. And I do believe that as we journey together, your walk with Christ will grow. I love you. Stakes in the ground.